Celebrating 26.63 years of service, more than a quarter of a century of news reporting to the worldwide amateur radio community, we are This Week in Amateur Radio, your all-amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. This is edition number 1385, with a release and air date of Saturday, September 13, 2025. Please take the program to your air following the cue tone.
Heard every week on the amateur radio bands all around the world, broadcast on low-power AM and FM stations all across the United States, and podcast on the internet since 1993, we are This Week in Amateur Radio, the worldwide premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Here are the stories for release around the earth as we come to air with edition number 1385 of This Week in Amateur Radio. Equatorial Guinea suspends amateur radio licenses. AST Space Mobile is granted limited use of the 70-centimeter amateur radio band by the FCC. Amateur radio serves their communities during a breakout of tornadoes in New England. September is National Preparedness Month, and the ARRL is offering up a ham radio supply checklist. Amateurs in India are mandated to transition from a paper license to digital. Current solar cycle prediction methodology raises doubts in scientific circles. Russia's mysterious buzzer UVB-76 starts transmitting coded messages. Mobile phone jamming in prisons is being considered by the FCC. NASA is seeking volunteers to help track the upcoming Artemis II mission. The FCC announces it will allow network-affiliated television stations to transition to next-gen TV known as ATSC-3. The ARRL labs assist amateurs in avoiding interference with the U.S. Space Force PAVE Pause over-the-horizon radar. A well-known European amateur radio supplier halts shipments to the U.S. due to tariffs and the lack of shipping channels. We will have the monthly volunteer monitoring report this week. And the chairman of the FCC climbs a television broadcast tower to promote the industry and its jobs. That's all straight ahead on today's edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. These headline stories will come to you in a moment along with this week's special features. We'll visit with Bruce Page, KK5DO, and get an update from AMSAT and what's new with all of those amateur satellites in orbit. Australia's own Onno Ben Shop, VK6FLAB, and Foundations of Amateur Radio will answer the question, in amateur radio, how small is small? Our own original amateur radio historian, Bill Continelli, W2XOY, Silent Key, returns with another edition of the Ancient Amateur Archives. This week we look back at the events of 9/11, when Bill found himself in New York City on that fateful morning, and how radio helped him escape the city. And we will stop by and visit with Bill Sawyer's AJ8B in the DX Corner with all the latest news on DXpeditions, DX, upcoming radio sport contests, and a lot more. That's all straight ahead as North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, takes to the air right now. Reporting from our headquarters studio just outside Albany, New York, sitting in the air chair in Studio B this week and enjoying the mostly dry weather we are having, I'm George, W2XBS.
And reporting this week from the sleepy little town of Cortlandville, New York, I'm Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
And reporting from our news bureau in Rochester, New York, along the southern shore of Lake Ontario, I'm Dave Wilson, WA2HOY.
And reporting from our news bureau in Sandwich, Illinois, where we're enjoying this fantastic, fair weather, and I'm stuck with some hard decisions on whether to get an elephant ear or a funnel cake, I'm Jordan Kurtz, Kilo Echo 9, Bravo, Papa Oscar.
And from our studios in Naugatuck, Connecticut, where we're finally warming up into the upper 70s and 80s this week after several weeks of cool weather, I'm Steve Sawyer, K1FRC.
And reporting from our news bureau just outside Albany, New York, in the Geek Cave studios, I'm Rich Lawrence, KB2MOB.
And reporting live from the warm and humid Space Coast in Florida, I am Ed Johnson, W2PH.
And reporting from our Troy, New York News Bureau, where the nights are getting chilly, I'm Eric, Kilo Delta 2, Romeo, Juliet X-Ray.
And reporting from our amateur radio outpost in the western Catskill Mountains of upstate New York, where the first twinges of orange and red and purple are just beginning to appear on maple trees in beautiful fall weather, I'm Don Hulick, K2ATJ.
And reporting from our news bureau in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where summer heat has returned with a vengeance, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR.
We have late-breaking news as we come to air this week. All amateur radio licenses are temporarily suspended in Malabo, Equatorial Guinea, following the detection of irregularities in their broadcasting. The Malabo government has decided to temporarily suspend all amateur radio licenses in the country due to irregularities detected in their issuance. The measure seeks to establish a new regulatory framework that guarantees effective control over the use of telecommunications frequencies and equipment in line with national security requirements. The decision was made at a meeting chaired by the Vice President of the Republic in charge of Defense and State Security, along with the Prime Minister and representatives from the Security, Defense, Finance, Transport, Treasury, and Telecommunications Regulatory Office sectors, known as ORTEL. The suspension is due to a failure in the established protocols for granting licenses. The measure was taken following the discovery of a case in which a foreign citizen, operating as an amateur radio operator, accessed sensitive areas such as Annobon and Batate using telecommunications equipment not authorized for his activity. The individual had applied for licenses in 2018 and again in 2025, paying a total of 531,000 CFA francs without properly verifying the legality of the equipment or the compliance of the assigned frequencies with national regulations. The Vice President has instructed ORTEL and state security agencies to ensure that all granted frequencies strictly comply with the country's technical and legal requirements. The goal is to ensure that no high-frequency equipment enters the country without proper approval and review of the license. Furthermore, those involved in the case have been ordered to appear in Malabo before Friday, September 12th with all relevant documents, including the equipment approval certificate signed back in March 2025 and the corresponding electronic visa. With these actions, the government of Equatorial Guinea reaffirms its commitment to state security, technological control, and responsible regulations of its telecommunications, considering a safer and more transparent environment for all citizens. And now here is Chris Perrine, KB2FAF, with our lead story.
The Federal Communications Commission approved limited use of amateur frequencies for 20 satellites to be developed by a Texas broadband company. The FCC's Space Bureau said in a statement that it was giving permission to AST Space Mobile to use frequencies between 430 and 440 megahertz on an emergency basis only. The regulator said its move was in direct response to overwhelming concerns raised by amateur radio operators. Citing potential interference among their issues, member societies of the International Amateur Radio Union, AMSAT, the ARRL, and individual amateurs worldwide also argued that alternate UHF allocations exist for the satellite telemetry, tracking, and command functions. More than 2,500 comments were submitted to the FCC. The FCC's action gives use of the amateur frequencies to the satellites for no more than a 24-hour period. The amateur radio 70-centimeter band is used by hams worldwide for such applications as mobile FM voice, analog and digital television, digital data transmissions, amateur radio satellites, and weak signal communications on SSB and CW. AST Space Mobile ultimately plans a full constellation of 248 satellites for broadband service from space.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
amateur radio volunteers serving the ARRL Amateur Radio Emergency Service and the National Weather Service Skywarn program were active over this past weekend. John Ross, KD8IDJ, has more.
They were serving their communities in New England as tornado-warned storms moved across New York, Connecticut, and Massachusetts. 5 EF1 tornadoes struck the central Massachusetts communities of Paxton, Holden, Berlin, and Stowe. A squall line of severe thunderstorms that would eventually have embedded tornadoes in central Massachusetts swept across the region as well. Skywarn nets activated on repeaters across the area. Reports came in rapidly of downed trees and wires, as well as hail up to 3/4 of an inch in diameter in western Massachusetts, with radio amateurs sharing critical damage reports from this area. In addition, reports of damage were received in all of the tornado path areas in near real time. It had been a below-normal 2025 severe weather season with only one large-scale severe weather event in July across Rhode Island and southeastern Massachusetts, said Rob Macedo, KD1CY, ARRL Eastern Massachusetts Section Coordinator and Skywarn Coordinator. That all changed on September 6th. Southern New England averages 2 tornadoes per year. The 6 states of New England average 8 tornadoes per year, and there had been none in 2025 until Saturday 9/6, when 2/3 of the average year total occurred. This outbreak also put Southern New England above average for tornadoes in the 2025 season. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
All of the amateur weather observations were shared with the National Weather Service in Boston and with the Norton Weather Forecast Office, WX1BOX, amateur radio team direct via repeaters using various applications, email, social media that the amateur radio team utilizes. All active Skywarn nets were secured around 6:30 p.m. Saturday. Andrew Lucanto, lead meteorologist at the National Weather Service in Norton, Massachusetts, commented, "Thanks to the entire team for all the reports today." A complete summary of the severe weather in southern New England can be seen on the WX1BOX website.
As the tornadoes that struck Massachusetts on September 6, 2025 demonstrate, you need to be ready for an emergency ahead of time. Radio amateurs were able to serve their communities and the National Weather Service because they were prepared. The Federal Emergency Management Agency has released a list of supplies to keep in an emergency supply kit, which includes things like food, water, medications, a first aid kit, and other useful items, but hams may want to take it a step further. ARRL Director of Emergency Management Josh Johnston, KE6MHB, says hams should make sure their stations are resilient, have a battery backup or alternate means of power. The grid may go down. Make sure your antennas are functional and that you have backups in case they are damaged. It may be a good idea to keep a few balins and some spools of wire to quickly erect antennas if needed, he said. In addition to having these items, Johnson says to test and exercise the equipment throughout the year. Consider getting your emergency gear out and doing a shakedown of it during a Parks on the Air operation. It puts your station to the test, gets you active on the air, and can be a fun activity done year-round. Find more information about resilience and preparedness through amateur radio at arrl.org/ARES.
September is National Preparedness Month, and the ARRL is working to arm members with knowledge and resources to be resilient in the face of disaster. With more detail on how you can prepare, we go to League headquarters, where John Ross, KD8IDJ, files this report.
Amateur radio serves as a powerful tool and national resource before and when all else fails. But being prepared goes beyond radio. Being ready to serve your community through ham radio begins with being ready yourself, said ARRL Director of Emergency Management Josh Johnson, KE5MHV. Johnson spent 17 years as a county emergency manager before coming to lead programs such as the ARRL Amateur Radio Emergency Service, ARES. Having a plan and preparing yourself will improve your chances of being resilient in the face of disaster. ARES works closely with the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, who has shared a checklist of 12 ways to prepare, which you can find right now at arrl.org. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
The FEMA recommended ways to prepare are sign up for alerts and warnings, make a plan, save for a rainy day, practice emergency drills, Test family communication plans. Safeguard documents. Plan with neighbors. Make your home safer. Know evacuation routes. Assemble or update supplies. Get involved in your community and document and insure property. You can find more information and resources at ready.gov/September and at awrl.org/Aries.
Hams in India, who received amateur radio licenses in paper form, are being required to replace those certificates with a digital license no later than September 15 by logging into Saral Sanchar, a web-based portal of the Department of Telecommunications. There is no application fee for the process, which provides amateurs with a QR code, an authenticated certificate. This is the equivalent of the amateur radio booklets that had been issued manually with paper certificates until December 31 of 2019. In early 2020, India began issuing all new and renewed amateur radio certificates digitally. The telecommunication rules of 2024 now require that the holders of the older paper certificates use the digital web-based portal as well. Failure to migrate will mean that when the license expires, it cannot be renewed.
Updating a story we've been keeping an eye on for you, 10 Band LLC has received permission to modify its station WI2XNX, having successfully conducted market trial evaluating the use of high-frequency spectrum for the delivery of financial market data to external trial participants, the company said. The modification will facilitate evaluating the performance of upgraded transmission infrastructure, including the development of more directional antennas and higher power transmitters aimed at improving signal fidelity and reach, and designing and testing a next-generation radio platform optimized for encoding financial data with the goal of ensuring reliable communication across a wider range of ionospheric conditions. WI2XNX is authorized up to 385 kilowatts effective radiated power in 9 HF bands at its Elburn, Illinois and Humptulis, Washington stations. The license is for experimental purpose only and does not permit commercial service or market access, the FCC did note, in applying 16 conditions to the experiment. Market trial testing is limited to up to 50 participants. RCA Telecom has added a third transmission site to WO2XPY in West Chicago. It comprises a 10 kilowatt amplifier, 3 Yagi antennas, plus a log periodic array.
As this year brings the solar maximum of cycle 25, a different kind of solar storm has been raging, one that challenges the long-standing and prevailing paradigm scientists use to help arrive at forecasts. Sociologist and statistician Frank Howell, Kilo 4 Foxtrot Mike Hotel, has done an extensive study of this so-called National Aeronautics and Space Administration and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration prediction formula, which uses a consensus methodology, pitting it against the work of solar physicist Scott McIntosh of Linkup Space. In this busy, high-profile year for the Sun and its activity, Frank has written extensively and presented a series of virtual talks on the subject in the United States and overseas. He has long discussed the competing models extensively in his blog, k4fmh.com. Frank's most recent talk, Progress in the Revolution, Sunspot Cycle Forecast Accuracy at Cycle 25, was given to Perrine Ham in the United Kingdom and can be seen on their YouTube channel. Whether the NASA team or the Macintosh team prevails, one thing is certain. Like coronal mass ejections themselves, this scientific competition over solar prediction promises to rage for some time to come.
The New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters is advocating for a new band plan, giving space to single sideband on 30 meters. Following the lead of the amateur band plan in place in Australia, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters is recommending the establishment of a new 10 kHz wide subband for single sideband on 30 meters. This change would divide the CW-only band in half, giving it 20 kHz at the bottom of the band. Digital mode operators would get 20 kHz of spectrum, double their current allocation at the top of the band. Sideband's proposed 10 kHz would be found between 10.120 and 10.130 MHz. With SSB operation already legal in New Zealand, the association notes that only the approval of this revised band plan stands in the way of the change taking place. The proposal is for this to occur on a 12-month trial basis, with a review to take place in the final months.
We pause for stations along the network to identify. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, available as a stream to your favorite digital device on Spotify, TuneIn.com, Overcast, iHeartMedia, and wherever you download your podcasts.
It is time for this month's edition from the Volunteer Monitor Program. The Volunteer Monitor Program is a joint initiative between ARRL and the FCC to enhance compliance in the amateur radio service. This is the current activity report of the VM program. A technician operator in Texas was issued an advisory concerning 40-meter FT8 operation. Another technician operator in Texas was issued an advisory concerning 15-meter FT8 operation on 40 and 15 meters. Technicians have only CW privileges on those bands. Technician operators in Louisiana, Missouri, and New Mexico were issued advisories for operating on 20-meter FT8, a band on which technicians have no operating privileges. An operator in Virginia was issued an advisory for deliberate interference to a net on 7.248 MHz. The frequency was not in use when the net control began the roll call. Still, the operator began deliberately interfering because his net was to start sometime later, and he wanted the frequency clear. The FCC considers this operation to be deliberate interference, in violation of Section 97.101 Subpart D of the Commission's rules. All frequencies in the amateur radio service are shared, and no non-emergency net has greater rights than any other amateur operator. A commendation was issued to an operator in Texas for courtesy shown to ADX station on April 19, 2025. The operator was managing an AM net on 17 meters, but changed frequencies at the request of the DX station. Advisory notices concerning improper wide signals were issued to stations in Washington, North Carolina, and Texas. Section 97.307 Subpart A of the Commission's rules states, "No amateur station transmission shall occupy more bandwidth than necessary for the information rate and emission type being transmitted, in accordance with good amateur practice." A commendation was issued to an operator in Illinois for his work with the local emergency management agency on the W9ANL repeater on 146.970 MHz, assisting in efforts to restore damaged power lines and removal of downed trees. 2 operators in New Hampshire received commendations for building a system of 2-meter and 70-centimeter nodes across mountainous terrain in New Hampshire. Before their installation, all communications had to be relayed. An operator in Virginia was issued an advisory notice for transmissions on 3.933 MHz after being asked to cease interference on top of existing communications and continuing the interference with unsolicited comments. There was one FCC meeting. The totals for monitoring for this report were 1,452 hours on HF frequencies and 2,181 hours on VHF frequencies and above, for a total of 3,633 hours. We thank Volunteer Monitor Program Administrator Riley Hollingsworth, K4ZDH, for this report.
The shortwave radio station UVB-76, famously known as The Buzzer, and located near Moscow, Russia, has resumed broadcasting encrypted messages after years of continuous monotone buzzing. Since the 1970s, the station has been known for its persistent droning sound, but recently it interrupted this usual broadcast twice to transmit coded messages consisting of Russian words, numbers, and cryptic codes. Among the transmitted messages, the previously used call sign NZHTI appeared, alongside sequences of numbers such as 38, 965, 78, 58, 88, 37. Some listeners speculated that these numbers might represent geographical coordinates. A video of the broadcast quickly spread on social media. Professor David Stupples, who teaches electronics and radio engineering at City University, London, suggested that the Russian government likely operates the station. He noted this might be a security measure and is unlikely to serve peaceful purposes. Operating continuously since at least the mid-1970s, UVB-76 transmits on the 4,625 kHz shortwave frequency, emitting a persistent buzzing sound interspersed with occasional voice messages. These spoken broadcasts often include lists of names, numerals, or coded phrases delivered in a flat, mechanical tone by both male and female voices. According to Priom.org, a respected monitoring group of radio observers, UVB-76 is believed to be part of a military communications network linked to Russia's Western Military District. Its messages have been categorized into three general types: monolith, user, and command, each believed to correspond to different levels or types of military operations. Arie Bender, a Dutch radio researcher, reflected on various theories about the station that have emerged over the years. Some say it is an old Soviet dead man switch that would trigger a nuclear attack on the West if the buzzing stops. Others believe it is a signal for UFOs or even a mind control device, he explained. UVB-76 attracted the attention of amateur radio enthusiasts starting in the 1980s. From the 1990s onward, it became known for its regular buzzing noises, occasionally interrupted by random names, words, and numbers. Some researchers argue that this variety suggests the station serves more than just an ordinary emergency frequency. Measurements by Professor Stupples show that the station broadcasts with thousands of watts of power reaching in all directions. Whether the latest messages can be decoded remains uncertain. However, much like during the Cold War, the Doomsday radio station continues to provoke curiosity and unease in the international community today. Meanwhile, Russia has launched the Bion M No. 2 spacecraft carrying, wait for it, 75 mice and 1,500 flies into polar orbit to study how they respond to the polar radiation environment.
Cell phone jamming is illegal in the United States, but the FCC is considering whether to give prisons permission to jam the cell phones of inmates. The Federal Communications Commission hopes to grant federal and state prisons the right to jam mobile phones that have been smuggled into inmates. The Commission has scheduled a vote this month to remove a restriction that keeps the prisons from such jamming. The inmates are not authorized to have the phones, which the Commission said are being used to assist them in conducting criminal activity while behind bars. The United States prohibits the use and even the sale or distribution of any equipment that can jam authorized signals, such as radio communication, police radar, GPS devices, and cell phones. Jamming is forbidden under the Communications Act of 1934, which has been amended and updated since its original drafting. The vote is scheduled for September 30th.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web podcasts are available.
Hi, this is Will Rogers, K5WLR, the narrator for our weekly amateur radio history series, A Century of Amateur Radio. This week it has been 24 years since the 9/11 attacks happened, so I thought I would take a week off from my duties as historian and bring in my predecessor and historian extraordinaire, the late Bill Continelli, W2XOY, who found himself at a work meeting in Manhattan on that fateful morning. So this week we present Bill's Ancient Amateur Archive edition of how radio helped Bill make his way out of New York City on September 11, 2001.
Ever since I entered the world of amateur and CB radio in the late 1960s, I wanted a station that was portable and battery operated for traveling and emergency use. Thus, over the years, I avoided the big tube-type rigs and instead focused on radios such as the Heathkit HW8, the realistic DX150B, homebrew transistorized QRP CW transmitters, 5-watt CB walkie-talkies, and other HF and VHF rigs that could fit in a duffel bag and operate anywhere. I kept Rayovac and Union Carbide in business with my battery purchases. This policy paid me many dividends, from the numerous QSOs I had on the road in my Volkswagen bus, to the many snow and ice storms I lived through in Buffalo, New York, to the time, in 1978, when I was on board a Greyhound bus in a snowstorm. We got stuck at a railroad crossing, and it was my call on my 2-meter HT that brought help. Over the years, I developed a habit of carrying a radio bag, usually a small briefcase, that contained various portable rigs, spare batteries, and antennas. In fact, the last time I ventured out of the house without the radio bag was on January 11th, 1981. On that fateful day, as I made a quick run to the store, my old VW bus threw a rod, and, as I pushed it off the road, I witnessed a car-pedestrian accident in which a boy was critically injured. From that day forward, my motto was, "Where I go, so goes the radios." I adhered to that policy on September 11, 2001, when I boarded the 5:10 a.m. Amtrak out of Albany, New York, bound for Manhattan, 142 miles to my south. My latest version of the radio bag was a small computer case which held a Yaesu FT50 dual-band HT, and a Linko FT1, a Cobra CB walkie-talkie, a Sony IC10 pocket-size AM/FM shortwave receiver, a Sharp Zorus palm top with built-in email capability, telescopic antennas, and spare batteries. I was prepared, so I thought. I arrived at Penn Station in Manhattan at 7:30 a.m. A taxi brought me to our New York City office on Lower Broadway, just 4 blocks from the World Trade Center, at 8 a.m. My meeting was on the 27th floor, but in an interior room far away from the windows. With all the noise in the room, we did not hear the first crash. A few minutes later, someone came in and told us about the plane hitting the North Tower. I pulled out the Sony, tuned to WINS 1010 AM, and we all listened to the initial reports. We just started to resume our meeting when we heard and felt the second plane crash into the South Tower. We terminated the meeting and left the office. We tried to get info from the people leaving the other offices, but they were too traumatized to tell us what happened. As we walked down the 27 flights of stairs, the Sony gave us the information. When we arrived at the streets were chaotic and the view was horrific. Since we were in front of a federal building and across from the federal courthouse, there were federal police everywhere. I tried their frequency, 417.2 megahertz, but all transmissions were scrambled. Not knowing the 2-meter and 70-centimeter repeater frequencies in Manhattan, I quickly scanned both bands on the FT50, but I heard nothing. The federal police warned us to get away from the federal buildings, and so we started walking north. Along the way, a coworker held the Sony, still tuned to 1010 WINS, where we received excellent news updates. Not knowing the police, fire, or EMS frequencies for New York City, I started scanning the VHF and UHF bands. I heard many stations, but none were actually at ground zero. I then tried the FRS channels. They were a jumble of voices, some in English. Many were near ground zero and described in terrifying detail what they saw. At this point, neither tower had collapsed. I switched over to the 156 MHz Marine band and heard a couple of stations, presumably in the Hudson River, give first-hand accounts of what they saw. I then tried the Cobra CB. Most channels were clogged with skip, but I did hear stations on channel 9, 15, and 19, probably on the West Side Highway, describing what they saw. We stopped at the Holiday Inn in Chinatown, about 10 blocks above ground zero. While we were there trying to call our families and co-workers on dead cell phones and overloaded landlines, the towers collapsed. We decided to walk to Penn Station, 45 blocks away, and wait for a train, even though WINS announced that the station was closed and no trains were running. On the march north, a co-worker held the Sony while I scanned around. Once again, I tried the VHF, UHF, and 800 MHz frequencies for police, fire, and EMS, but I soon realized that without a specific frequency list, it was like looking for a needle in a haystack. I then switched to the railroad frequencies, scanning between 160.2 and 161.4 MHz in 15 kHz steps. Here, I was more successful. I found 6 hot frequencies where we heard the Amtrak and MTA police scouring the tunnels with bomb-sniffing dogs. And, despite the announcements on 1010 winds, we heard the employees at Penn Station getting the trains ready for the soon-to-be massive exodus from the city. Our 45-block walk to Penn Station, we were looking back every minute to watch the massive clouds of smoke and ash rise from the ruins. We had left Lower Broadway just in time. Otherwise, we also might be covered in ash and dust, as we saw on many emergency vehicles that passed us. We also saw many people coated head to foot in ash and dust. When we reached Penn Station, there were at least 20 to 25,000 people milling about outside. Official word via Penn Station people with bullhorns and WINS was that the station was closed, but the Yesu told us a different story. Thus, while many people trudged off to walk across one of the bridges or find a hotel, we stayed put. The Yesu and the Sony made us many friends in the crowd. They were literally draped over our shoulders to hear the latest news or scanner call. Many only had cell phones, now useless with overload, so we were the only source of information. For a few minutes, I switched over to shortwave, tuning through everything from the BBC to the militia stations. None of them were as up-to-date as WINS, so we stayed on the AM band. Finally, the Yesu gave us welcome news. The station would open in 15 minutes for northbound Amtrak and Metro North passengers. The Amtrak door was on 34th Street. We rushed to that entrance 2 minutes ahead of the bullhorn announcements. Inside, we stayed glued to the Yesu as crew set up the trains. When we heard that the northbound Amtrak would depart from Gate 6, we made a beeline for it, arriving before the PA announcement. Thus, we were the first passengers on the first Amtrak train out of New York City. Once we were moving, our speed was only 30 miles an hour versus the 100-plus miles per hour that Amtrak uses on that line. Our conductor said it was because of the backlog of all the trains, but the Yesu told a different story. They were afraid of sabotage, so we stayed at 30 miles per hour all the way to Albany. We listened to the Amtrak and CSX police along the way, checking out the line for anything unusual. And, as we pulled into the station, the Yesu gave us warning of the media waiting for our train. So, what did I learn from this experience? First, having the radios was not enough. I needed the amateur repeater frequencies, the subaudible tones, and the offsets, as well as the Manhattan emergency frequencies. I wasted a lot of time in random searches and probably passed many active frequencies that were temporarily quiet. With frequencies widely available on the internet, there's no excuse not to be prepared when you visit another city. Second, pre-program your radios if possible. My Yesu's memory channels are a hodgepodge of frequencies including TV and weather transmissions that will stop any scanning in its tracks. If your scanner or HT has banks, pre-program 1 or 2 banks with about 20 of the top frequencies you will need. Then you can lock out the rest and concentrate on the priority channels. Third, choose your radios carefully. In retrospect, I should have had a GMRS or FRS radio with me. There may be situations where you need to communicate with non-hams. REACT operates a coast-to-coast system of emergency repeaters on 462.675 MHz, and the FRS emergency channel is 462.5625 MHz, which is FRS channel 1. Fourth, bring an earphone or a headset. I didn't mind half of 33rd Street listening to WINS, but I wanted the information from the Yesu only for me and my group. Since September 11th, I've gone to Buffalo twice and Seattle, Washington. I was more prepared. I have a trip to Phoenix coming up next week, and I've downloaded and programmed key frequencies into the Yesu and Alinco. There's a second radio bag packed for the Phoenix trip. It has FRS and GMRS radios, as well as a brand new Yaesu FT817. I'm going well prepared and in style. This is Bill Continelli, W2XOY, for This Week in Amateur Radio.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available as an on-demand stream from Spotify, Deezer, and wherever podcasts are available.
Hello and welcome to the DX Corner for your weekly dose of DX as part of Ham Radio's oldest ham radio magazine on the air, This Week in Amateur Radio. I'm Bill, AJ8B. As of this Saturday, there will be 102 days until Christmas. Time is flying, so we better get started. The DX word for this week is OQRS. You have heard me use the term quite a bit, and I thought a deeper dive would make some sense. In amateur radio, OQRS stands for Online QSL Request System. It's a web-based tool that allows operators to request QSL cards from DXpeditions, contest stations, or other operators without sending a physical QSL card or by using traditional mail. The key features of OQRS are convenience. Operators can request QSLs online, often using a form that includes details of the contact, such as call sign, date, time, band, and mode. Efficiency. It reduces the workload for DX stations by automating the QSL process. And you can imagine if you worked 40 or 50,000 folks, you'd want a better way to do it. It's cost effective, often cheaper than sending physical cards via email, especially internationally. Options are, many systems offer both Bureau, which is free or low cost via national QSL bureaus, and Direct, which is paid, faster delivery options. And there are a couple of platforms that this is supported on. Clublog OQRS, and this is one of the most widely used systems, especially by DXpeditions. QRZ.com and HamQTH allow you to integrate OQRS into their profiles. And finally, individual DXpedition websites often have custom OQRS forms. So OQRS is a simpler way and a more efficient way for you to get QSL cards from the station you need it. And if you need more information, just drop me an email at thedxmentor@gmail.com. If you're interested, there is a DX workshop in Bowling Green, Kentucky on Saturday, October 4th. The sessions will cover DX basics and overview, DX operating techniques, and RF propagation. Check out www.wkdxa.org/events for more details, or as always, you can contact me at thedxmentor@gmail.com. I can guarantee that this will be the best $15 you've spent in a long time for a day of DX networking and learning. Each week, I try to focus on those entities that will be available in the next 7 days. There is so much data to sift through that I thought a focus on just the next week might be helpful. Here's what you should find QRV when you sit down to tune the bands. The following DX information comes from Bernie, W3UR, editor of the Daily DX, the Weekly DX, and the How's DX column in QST. If you would like a free 2-week trial of the Daily DX, your only source of real-time DX information, just drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com. Do you need Bangladesh? I do. The Bangladesh Telecommunication Regulatory Commission has authorized a special operation November 11th to the 17th, and that will be S21 SDX. They will be on the air from Sundarbans, the UNESCO World Heritage Site. According to UNESCO, quote, the Sundarbans mangrove forest, one of the largest such forests in the world, lies on the delta of 3 major rivers on the Bay of Bengal. It is adjacent to the border of India's Sundarbans World Heritage Site, inscribed in 1987. The site is intersected by a complex network of tidal waterways, mudflaps, and small islands of salt-tolerant mangrove forests and presents an excellent example of ongoing ecological processes. The area is known for its wide range of fauna, including 260 bird species, the Bengal tiger, and other threatened species such as the estuarian crocodile and the India python. All QSOs will be uploaded to LOTW and Clublog. Paper QSLs will be available through I8K8C. I may take that week off because I need to get them. I've never worked Bangladesh. I need to get them in the log. So just might have to do that. Eurus YL2GM and Eugene AE5EL have been operating as 3 Charlie 3 Whiskey from a hotel in Equatorial Guinea close to the ocean. They were able to install an end-fed half-wave antenna, 3 HF verticals, and a 5-element Yagi. However, there was insufficient space for a low-band antenna. They have amassed 21,544 QSOs and have uploaded their logs to ClubLog. More information, including daily updates, is available on the DXpedition website. The Radio Club of Provins, F6KOP, has completed its preparations for the September 15th to 26th FP5KE DXpedition to Saint-Pierre and Miquelon Islands. All equipment has been numbered and packed. Collectively, the team will have 16 12-kilogram carry-ons with their radios, lightweight amplifiers, end quote, the ACOM 500, for instance, and peripherals. They're also carrying on 10 notebook computers. Their checked baggage includes 5 32-kilogram bags with antennas and 14 23-kilogram bags. In all, they are bringing 1,550 pounds of gear, and that was my translation into the U.S. metric, or the U.S. system. DK3RN Peter will be in Kyrgyzstan from September 21st to the 29th, visiting a technical university for a cooperation project. He plans to operate Echo X-ray stroke DK3RN, mostly CW, and possibly sideband on 20 and 15 meters, but not FT8. Split operation will be used to manage pileups. On Friday, September 26th, he will operate portable from mountains near Bishkek, weather permitting. Other day activities will depend on local conditions. Delta Fox 9 Tango Mike, Gaby, and DL2 SWW Frank have arrived at their first location to operate Sierra Mike 6 stroke home calls from POTA SE 0319 in Sweden. The site is situated near the coastline, approximately 60 kilometers north of Göteborg. The Saudi Amateur Radio Society announces in celebration of the 95th observation of the Saudi National Day Special Event Station, HZ95ND, 7 Zulu 95ND, and 8 Zulu 95ND will be QRV from September 4th to September 23rd. Now, Saudi Arabia is not rare, but I wouldn't say it's that common. So if you need that on certain band slots, make sure you work them between September 4th and the 23rd. Bo, OZ1DJJ, is back in Greenland until September 16th. He plans to be QRV at OX3LX from Nuuk, West Greenland, in grid locator GP44DE. He might take a 1 to 2 day side trip over to IOTA NA220. As always, this is a work trip with radio activity in his spare time, and you can QSL that via OZ0J. And he's only there till the 16th, so you probably only have a day or two as you're listening to this. Per 425 DX News, 30 special call signs will be on the air September 1st to the 28th to mark 85 years since the Battle of Britain. In particular, it is named, quote, Polish Wings in the Battle of Britain, end quote, highlighting the role of the Polish Air Force squadrons that flew alongside the UK's Royal Air Force. This event is being organized by UK-based Polish clubs M0SQC and M0KKN and the Polish Amateur Radio Union PZK. More information about this is on their website, and certificates and EQSLs are available on the website as well. Torsten DL4APJ and Udo DL2AQI will be operating in the Aland Islands holiday style from September 15th to the 26th. Call signs were not mentioned yet. They will be on RIDI, PSK, FT4, FT8, CW, and sideband on 80 through 10 meters, and I did say RIDI, as well as 2 meters, 430, and 1200 megahertz. And you can QSL the group to DL4APJ via the Bureau, Direct, EQSL, LOTW, Club Log, or QRZ or HRD Log. So all the different versions you can try. The DX Mentor features a new podcast this weekend, an interview with Steve, AG4W. The topic is the upcoming DXpedition of 3 Charlie 2 Mike Delta. Check it out and learn all about the DXpedition before they launch, and you might find easier ways to work them. And let me know what you think of it. If you are interested in DX podcasts and YouTube channels, you should check out the DX Mentor Facebook page and subscribe to be kept up to date on all of the DX activities that are going on. Until next week, this is Bill, AJB, saying 7-3, and thanks to my XYL Karen for her love and support. I hope to hear you in the pileups. Have a great DX week.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, Available as an on-demand stream from Spotify, Deezer, and wherever podcasts are available.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. I've owned a Yaesu FT857D radio since becoming an amateur, and at the time I was absolutely blown away by how much radio fits inside the box. It's smaller than most of the commercial radios I'd seen when I bought it. I came across a video by Michael, Kilo Bravo 9 Victor Bravo Romeo the other day showcasing a wooden cigar box with a complete, well, almost complete, POTA or Parks on the Air activation kit. I say almost since Dave, Kilo Zulu 9 Victor, the owner of the kit, points out that the box doesn't contain an antenna. It made me wonder, how small is small? According to RigPix, the lightest transmitter on an amateur band, in this case the 5 GHz or 5 cm band, is an amateur TV transmitter, weighing in at 3.9 grams. The eShine TX06 is capable of FM with about 18 MHz of bandwidth with an audio subcarrier. Of course, that's not a transceiver, but I thought it worth mentioning in case you needed an excuse for something tiny in your shack. Besides, as far as I can tell, there's never too much amateur TV in the world. I've built a crystal radio on a breadboard, which is tiny, but it doesn't transmit. So, to set the stage, I think we need to limit ourselves to transceivers, that is, a device capable of both transmitting and receiving, on amateur bands. Before continuing, I'd like to express my thanks to Yana, Sierra Mike 0, Oscar Foxtrot Victor, for the rigpix.com database that he's been maintaining in Notepad since 2000. Without the invaluable information documented for the currently 7,512 radios, I'd be spending an awful lot of time hunting for information. Moving on, the Faraday RF board is a transceiver capable of using 900 MHz or the 33 cm band. It comes in at 30 grams, but without a computer it's a circuit board with potential. The Pico APRS by Tanner Delta Bravo 1 November Tango Oscar is a 2-meter transceiver specifically for APRS. Weighs in at 52 grams and similar in look and a third of the weight of an Ericsson T18 mobile phone. Speaking of mobile phones, the Pico APRS does Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, can pair with your phone and act as an AX25 modem. I'll confess, I'm drooling. Moving right along, for 70 centimeters there's a Rubix and Walk and Talk, weighs in at 65 grams. Mind you, the RigPix database puts this under the license-free PMR 446 section, which comes with a sage warning: check your local laws before transmitting. There's a few Alinco DJ-C models for different markets that operate on 2 meters or 70 centimeters, weighing in at 75 grams. The ADALM Pluto weighs 114 grams, but you'll need a USB power supply of some sort to make it do anything. It can operate between 70 MHz and 6 GHz, but the user interface is limited to a single button and LED. So if you want to interact with it, you'll need some external technology. Moving on to HF transceivers, weighing in at 199 grams, without the bag but all the options, is the Elecraft KH1, transmits on 40, 30, 20, 17 and 15 meters, and receives between 6 and 22 MHz. It's CW only, but you can receive SSB. If CW isn't your thing, RTTY and PSK can be used on the 40-meter band with a silent system Handy PSK 40. Presumably the Handy PSK 20 runs on 20 meters, both weigh in at 250 grams. The Zittel P20XX SSB does SSB, AM, FM and CW, transmits on 10, 11, 12 and 15 meters as well as the Mars frequencies, and receives between 14 and 30 MHz, weighs 300 grams, even comes with CT CSS. Another Elecraft model, the KX2, weighs in at 370 grams, does 80 meters to 10 meters, and the walk bands does SSB, CW, and data. Mind you, you'll also need to add the weight for the microphone and paddles and factor in a computer if you want to do more than PSK and RTTY. The Expert Electronics Sun SDR2 QRP does 160 meters to 10 meters, the walk bands, and 6 meters, weighs in at 500 grams, has a network port and 2 independent receivers, operates at 5 watts. There's no user interface unless you count the reset and power buttons, so I'm not sure if it can operate on any mode with just a microphone. But given the depending on software disclaimers throughout, I'm going to guess you'll need to bring a computer to make it sing. The Ryzen RS918 SSB does all HF amateur bands between 160 meters and 10 meters, has a user interface and display, even a big tuning knob, has built-in FreeDV and does FM, SSB and CW. I'd hazard a guess that this is the lightest self-contained transceiver that you can take out on a POTA mission to a park, weighs 623 grams and comes with an internal battery. The Elecraft KX3 also does 160 meters to 10 meters and 6 meters with a 2 meter option, weighs in at 680 grams, but that doesn't include any options. And finally, we pass 1 kilogram and hit 1100 grams and discover a radio that does all bands and modes, the ICOM IC705 with a battery, but no antenna. The Yaesu FT817, FT817DN and FT818 weigh 70 grams more, but that weight includes both a battery and antenna. Of course, there are other options. For example, there's the True SDX by Manuel, Delta Lima 2 Mike Alpha November, and Guido, Papa Echo 1 November November Zulu. Does 80, 60, 40, 30, and 20 meters, CW, SSB, AM, and FM. Comes in a kit, weighs 140 grams. It's not on RigPix, so I only know about it because it was mentioned by Dave, Kilo Zulu 9 Victor. Similarly, I bumped into, wait for it, a single transistor transceiver called the Petitico. In case you're wondering, Petitico means very small in Portuguese, and Petitico means very, very small. Designed by Miguel, Papa Yankee 2 Oscar Hotel, it comes in various revisions, including one by Cyprian, Yankee Oscar 6 Delta X-Ray Echo, also known as DX Explorer on YouTube, complete with a circuit board design and, with some modifications, can do AM in addition to CW. It's also not in the RigPix database, and I have no idea what it weighs. The point being that this rundown is intended as a starting point to explore how small you can really get, and still activate the park or peak you intended to. While you're contemplating weight, remember to account for power, control, and most importantly, an antenna, or 6. Again, big thank you to Jana, Sierra Mike, Zero Oscar Foxtrot Victor for the rigpix.com website. Also, thank you for the memories of the Spectra Video SV318 and SV328. The last time I bumped into one of those was in 1980 Mumble, when I was working in a computer shop on the Haarlemmerstraat in Leiden, Mr. Micro Zap, if you're curious. What lightweight adventures are you looking for next? I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima Alpha Bravo.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web podcasts are available.
NASA seeks volunteers to passively track the Artemis II Orion spacecraft as the crewed mission travels to the Moon and back to Earth. NASA is asking for those with the necessary capabilities to observe the Doppler shift on the Orion's S-band return link carrier signal. The monitoring is designed to archive and keep a carrier lock solely for purposes of tracking the spaceship. Volunteers will not be transmitting or uplinking signals. Orion's S-band signal is between 2,200 and 2,290 MHz. The Artemis II test flight, a launch of the agency's Space Launch System rocket, and Orion spacecraft will send NASA astronauts Reid Wiseman, KF-5 LKT, The commander, Victor Glover, KI-5BKC, the pilot, and Christina Hammock Cook, as well as the Canadian Space Agency astronaut Jeremy Hansen, KF-5LKU. The launch is expected to be no later than April of 2026, and the flight will last an estimated 10 days on an approximately 10-day mission around the moon. The mission will rely on NASA's Near Space Network and Deep Space Network for primary communications and tracking support throughout its launch, orbit, and re-entry. However, with a growing focus on commercialization, NASA wants to further understand industry's tracking capabilities. This collaboration opportunity builds upon a previous request released by NASA's Space Communication and Navigation Program during the Artemis I mission, where 10 volunteers successfully tracked the uncrewed Orion spacecraft in 2022 on its journey thousands of miles beyond the moon and back. During the Artemis I mission, participants, ranging from international space agencies, academic institutions, commercial companies, nonprofits, and private citizens, attempted to receive Orion's signal and use their respective ground antennas to track and measure changes to the radio waves transmitted by Orion. By offering this opportunity to the broader aerospace community, we can identify available tracking capabilities outside the government, said Kevin Goggins, NASA's Deputy Associate Administrator for the Space Communications and Navigations Program at NASA's headquarters in Washington. This data will help inform our transition to a commercial-first approach, ultimately strengthening the infrastructure needed to support Artemis missions and our long-term Moon-to-Mars objectives. Responses are due by 5 p.m. EDT on Monday, October 27, 2025.
The Bella Vista Radio Club, or BVRC, in Northwest Arkansas, an ARRL Special Service Club, found a good outreach opportunity with the Northwest Arkansas Maker Fair held Saturday, September 6, 2025. With more details on amateur radio at the Maker Fair, we go to John Ross, KD8IDJ, with this report.
The event touts that it brings together creators, innovators, and DIY enthusiasts to showcase their projects, share ideas, and show us all what the future can be. BVRC is a large club and found a lot of interest quickly, said club member James Bennett, KA5DVS, who organized the radio presence at the event. I made announcements at the monthly BVRC meetings, and several club members volunteered to help in planning, supplying equipment, and other needs, as well as staffing that booth. The club visited with over 100 people who stopped by their booth. Most were familiar with, or at least very curious about ham radio, noted Bennett. However, we also heard a few comments such as, is anyone still doing ham radio? And they thought that was only used by truckers years ago, so there is a bit of an information gap on ham radio within the maker community, and this is mirrored by the surprisingly low number of hams familiar with the maker movement. Radio clubs are vital to the growth of amateur radio. ARRL has declared 2026 to be the year of the club, and radio clubs such as BVRC will be a central focus of support next year. They are on the front lines of sharing amateur radio with their communities. Bennett feels that last weekend's booth was a good use of time to do so. Maker fairs are an outstanding venue for presenting ham radio and for ham clubs to engage with the maker community, one that is filled with technically oriented folks who love tinkering, hacking, and building. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
These included Tom Norfeld, W5XNA, Ryan Biazzo, K5HEX, John Robinson, W5HB, Jan Hagen, WB5JAN, and Kathy Long, who helped set up and staff the booth as well. Other club members who assisted included Sharon Edmondson, KC5SKY, and Alex Smith, KI5EQK, he said. For more information on BVRC, visit bellavista.radioclub.org. To find a maker fair in your area, use the map tool located at makerfair.com/global map. That's makerfair, makerfaire.com/global map. Well done, guys.
Here are the results of the recent section manager nomination period for the term beginning January 1st, 2026. The following are declared elected with no opposition. New section managers in Michigan, Ralph Katz, AA8RK. In Santa Barbara section, Keith Elliott, W6KME. Continuing section managers are as follows. In Alabama, Dennis Littleton, K4DL. In Alaska, David Stevenson, KL7EB. In Delaware, Stephen Keller, KC3DSO. In the East Bay section, Mike Patterson, N6JGA. In Kansas, Ron Cowan, KB0DTI. In New Mexico, Bill Matter, K8TE. And in Tennessee, David Thomas, KM4NYI. And in the Western Massachusetts section, Ray LaJoy, AA1SE. The ARRL Field Organization is the grassroots core that makes up the 60,000 volunteers among ARRL members. It is divided into 71 sections, each of which is led by a volunteer section manager who is elected by the members of that section. Section managers serve 2-year terms.
United Space Command headquarters is being moved to Huntsville, Alabama, known as Rocket City, USA. The move was announced in a press conference on September 2nd, 2025. John Ross, KD8IDJ, is here with all the details on the move and its implications.
Huntsville will host the 2026 ARRL National Convention as part of the Huntsville Hamfest, but there's a bigger connection between U.S. Space Command and amateur radio. Space Command utilizes forces such as the U.S. Space Force to accomplish its command mission. The ARRL lab supports the U.S. Space Force Phased Array Warning System, PAVPALS, early warning radar installations, which scan the skies for incoming missiles and space junk. Since 2007, the ARRL lab has been conducting this crucial analysis using Longley Rice terrain modeling to determine if an amateur fixed station repeater or EME station is eligible for a waiver to be granted by the military to run more than 50 watts of RF power on the 70 centimeter band, currently allowed with a 100-mile radius of either Cape Cod Air Force Station in Massachusetts or Beale Air Force Base in California. We want to ensure that amateurs can exercise as many operating privileges as possible while understanding the need for the Space Force to operate without interference, said ARRL Lab Manager George Spada, K1GKS. The reports provided to the Space Force advise a cone of protection in azimuth and elevation at which the amateur world would be limited to a power level and which would not interfere with the radar. Amateurs are secondary users of the 70 centimeter band, and the ARRL Lab's cooperation with the military helps ensure that we do not interfere with this vital function of our nation's security. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
As of this writing, the lab is conducting this analysis for 2 different waiver requests. It is an important part of the work we do to serve radio amateurs, said Spada.
You are listening to North America's premier news and information service for the amateur radio hobbyist. We are This Week in Amateur Radio.
Bruce Page, KK5DO, is here now with this week's AMSAT report. Bruce?
Thanks, John. The ARRL DXCC program has 2 stations added to the list with satellite endorsements. What makes these 2 special is that they are the first from their respective countries. Sudan TA4SO is the first ARRL DXCC holder from Turkey, and Max EI6KC is the first from Ireland. Congratulations to both. On September 19th, there are 4 CubeSats scheduled to be deployed from the ISS. They are GHS-01, Dragonfly, STARS ME2, and RSP-03. The frequencies have not been published yet. One satellite will have APRS. One will take digital recordings and repeat them over an analog FM transponder. We will have more information as it becomes available. Finally, everyone likes a challenge. AMSAT Spain and URE have organized their 5th AM1SAT biennial contest. The goal is to make the longest satellite contact on a LEO satellite only. This allows the contest to be available to hams worldwide. There are many LEO satellites to choose from, and you never know when that one contact you make is going to put you in this year's record book. The dates for this are September 15th through the 21st. This is Bruce Page, KK5DO. Back to you, John.
And thanks, Bruce, for that report.
It is time for this week's look at solar weather and the latest propagation forecast. Solar activity has been at very low to low levels this past week. Low-level C-class flaring was observed from regions 4210 and 4207. Slight growth was observed in regions 4213 and 4214. The rest of the spotted regions were either stable or in decay. Solar activity is expected to remain at low levels, with a chance for isolated M-class minor to moderate flares through September 13th. A coronal mass ejection eruption was observed just beyond the western limb on September 9th. No impacts are expected, and no Earth-directed coronal mass ejections were observed. Solar wind parameters continue to be enhanced under positive polarity coronal hole high-speed stream influences. Solar wind speed increased from approximately 450 km per second to near 550 km per second. Elevated solar wind conditions are expected to continue through September 11th, under positive polarity coronal hole high-speed stream influences, with waning influences into September 12th. Solar flare activity simultaneously decreased significantly, while all sunspot groups moved to the western half of the solar disk. Instead, we are now observing a large coronal hole, located mostly north of the solar equator, whose boundary has already crossed the central meridian. The intensified solar wind, which is definitely blowing from its western edge, is expected to reach Earth September 13th. It will likely contribute to increased geomagnetic activity, which, combined with relatively low solar activity, will have negative consequences for the state of the ionosphere. Maximum usable frequency values will decrease. Attenuation will increase, and shortwave propagation conditions will deteriorate. Starting in the second half of September, however, solar activity will begin to increase, although not as significantly as it did back in August. In addition, geomagnetic activity appears to be declining at the same time. The approaching autumn equinox will also have a significant impact on the state of the ionosphere. These are already 3 reasons why shortwave propagation conditions should gradually improve. For more information concerning radio propagation, visit the ARRL Technical Information Service, read a quick guide to HF propagation using solar indices, and check out the propagation page of Karl Lewetzelschwab, K9LA. For customizable propagation charts, visit the vocap online for Ham Radio website.
Just ahead in radio sport this week, September 13th through the 14th, it's the ARRL EME contest, CW phone and digital. Also on the 13th and 14th, the WAEDX contest, single sideband and phone. September 13th, Africa FT4DX contest, digital. September 14th as well, the North American Sprint, that's CW. September 15th, the RSGB FT4 contest, that's digital. September 18th, the BCC QSO party, CW phone and digital. And on September 20th through the 22nd, it's the ARRL 10 GHz and up contest, CW phone and digital. And remember to visit the ARRL contest calendar for more events and information in your area. Upcoming section, state, and division convention, September 12th through the 13th. It's the Slidell EOC Hamfest, hosting the ARRL Louisiana State Convention. That's in Slidell, Louisiana. September 19th through the 21st, the Duke City Hamfest, hosting the ARRL New Mexico State Convention in Albuquerque, New Mexico. September 20th through the 21st, the Midwest Superfest, hosting the ARRL Central Division Convention in Chillicothe, Illinois. And on September 27th, the ARRL Dakota Division Convention, that's in Moorhead, Minnesota. And don't forget to search the ARRL Hamfest and Convention database to find more events in your area. Battleship Iowa Amateur Radio Association's BIARA NI6BB will celebrate the U.S. Navy's 250th birthday with radio operations on October 4th through the 19th, 2025. Frequencies will be on or near those listed on the front page of the BIARA.org Battleship Iowa Amateur Radio Association webpage. Modes will be at the discretion of the individual control operators manning NI6BB. Operating hours are expected to be between 1400 and 2400 UTC. That's 0700 and 1900 6:00 local Pacific time. QSLs will be available per the detailed instructions found on the website. For more information, please contact W6HB at BIARA.org.
Many U.S. amateurs have learned from many retailers around the world how America's tariffs are affecting their ability to order imports. In France, one leading ham radio equipment supplier announced it was among those companies halting deliveries to the U.S. altogether. Founded in France in 2014, PassionRadio.com has become a leading online seller of ham radio receivers, antennas, and other equipment to customers around the world. From August 25th, however, the company suspended all shipments to the United States, noting that the French National Postal Operator has stopped accepting U.S.-bound parcels. The company's director, David F1JXQ, has said on the company's webpage, with constant changes in tariffs, shipping cost, and carrier processes, we cannot guarantee fair or transparent conditions for our U.S. customers any longer. Our priority is to restore a reliable and cost-effective shipping solution as soon as possible. He added that the import duties are paid by the buyer, not the seller. When the purchased good arrives in the U.S., the seller has no control over that. U.S. Parcel and other shipping services are also reviewing deliveries to the United States. UPS expects to apply an extra international processing fee to all imports from anywhere outside the U.S. starting September 8th. Imports to Europe from the U.S. remain unaffected, David said. He went on to say that our collaboration with 5 U.S.-based suppliers continues without disruption, as the European Union has not imposed any retaliatory tariffs or reciprocal 15% import duties on the products arriving from the United States. Meanwhile, hams in the U.S. have also began to feel the impact of another sweeping marketplace change. Low-cost purchases from overseas that were once not subject to such tariffs have lost that long-standing exception. Those so-called de minimis parcels are estimated to make up as much as 97% of packages imported. The elimination of this exception also affects awards or merchandise ordered through SOTA. Awards manager Barry, GM4TOE, wrote on the SOTA Reflector on August 29th. That he was unable to process any orders for low-value shipments to the United States.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
It is time for this week's edition of AMSAT Satellite Shorts from All Over. And this week we begin in the United Kingdom, where we find that the Radio Society of Great Britain 2025 convention will be held on October 1st through the 12th at the Kents Hill Conference Centre, Milton Keynes. The program is full of entertaining, intriguing, and thought-provoking presentations and have been organized into 3 streams: Discover, Learn, and Progress. The organizers are also excited to offer 3 workshops to help attendees learn and develop skills in a practical setting. Young hams who are under 21, you can attend the convention free of charge. Attendees who are under the age of 16 must be accompanied by a responsible adult. The presentations will be streamed live by the BATC and recorded for later viewing on YouTube. Streaming links will be made available as the event gets closer. Information on the complete presentation schedule and registration details can be found on the RSGB's website. Next we hear how SpaceX's Dragon cargo spacecraft successfully finished a test reboost of the International Space Station on September 3rd according to NASA. The freighter fired 2 of its Draco engines for 5 minutes and 3 seconds during the maneuver, agency officials wrote in a Wednesday statement. The ISS orbits roughly 250 miles above Earth on average, but naturally falls back to our planet due to atmospheric drag. Visiting cargo spacecraft therefore take on the job of lifting the orbiting complex higher every few minutes. On Wednesday, Dragon's efforts got the station to an orbit of 260.9 by 256.3 miles according to NASA. The new boost kit in Dragon will help sustain the orbiting lab's altitude through a series of longer burns planned periodically throughout the fall of 2025, agency officials added. NASA has said these tests will also be important for another SpaceX job down the road, and that is the deorbiting the ISS itself.
The newly launched NASA Synthetic Aperture Radar satellite has successfully deployed a record-breaking 39-foot wide radar antenna in orbit, unfolding it like an umbrella after weeks of careful preparation. Launched on July 30th from India's Satish Dhawan Space Center, the satellite carries two powerful radar systems, L-band from NASA and S-band from the Indian Space Research Organization, or ISRO. ISRO is capable of penetrating clouds, vegetation, snow, and tracking changes on the Earth's surface. The massive gold-plated wire mesh reflector weighs 142 pounds, was released through a carefully staged process involving joint-by-joint boom extensions and the firing of explosive bolts. It took 4 days for the structure to fully extend before motors and cables pulled it into its final drum-like shape. The antenna reflector, made of gold-plated wire mesh, has been compared to the eye of the system, and it operates, as we said, on both L and S bands. Nexstar will be capturing detailed data about forest and wetland ecosystems undergoing change, about the impact of earthquakes on the Earth's crust, and the motion of glaciers and sheets of ice over time. The mission is designed to help communities around the world plan ahead for natural disasters and implement recovery from them more efficiently. Karen St. Germain, director of NASA's Earth Science Division in Washington, D.C., said the project will go a long way toward using science to assist in decision-making under these difficult circumstances, from responding to disasters to formulating agricultural policy. According to NASA, the system that operates on the L-band is particularly suited to penetrate forest canopy and clouds. The S-band system has particular sensitivity to light vegetation and moisture in snow. The unprecedented joint satellite project will collect an estimated 80 terabytes of data daily.
It is with great pleasure that AMSAT announces two recipients of the Gridmaster Awards in the past week. Bruce Robertson, VE7PTN, has achieved AMSAT Gridmaster Award number 74 by confirming all 488 Maidenhead grid squares in the continental United States. In his announcement, Bruce thanked everyone for the QSOs and especially the rovers. Thanks for roving. His recognition of the portable operators who make rare grids possible underscores the community spirit at the heart of this award. Grace Pape, K8LG, has also earned the AMSAT Gridmaster Award, becoming recipient number 73. Like all Gridmasters, this reflects years of dedication in working and confirming all 488 CONUS grids. Her achievement places her in the very small circle of operators who have reached this milestone.
The massive Erie Canal in New York State is the scene of a massive anniversary celebration on the amateur bands. 10 days on the air, 14 clubs in New York State, 6 months of planning. It all adds up to 200 years of the Erie Canal, the celebrated public works project that sparked economic growth by providing a connection between the Atlantic Ocean and the Great Lakes in the early 1800s. It ultimately earned the nickname the Mother of Cities because of its connections, fostering the development of towns, villages, and cities. Ham radio operators will light up the Erie Canalway National Heritage Corridor with an operating event that runs from September 16 through September 25. Many of them will also be doing Parks on the Air activations, including a notable twofer that includes the Empire State Trail. Organizers Matt, K2EAG, Angela, N3ARB, and Mike, N2MAK, are encouraging clubs to create their own commemorative QSL cards for the event. The organizers aren't just looking to collect QSOs, although they want to gather stories from operators about their experience during the event. They can be emailed directly at matt@k2eag@arrl.net or posted on the social media with the hashtag symbol and one of these three words, Erie Canal 200, Erie Canalway, or Parks on the Air.
The United Kingdom is poised to become Europe's first country offering legal satellite connectivity for smartphones. The regulator, Ofcom, has released a consultation authorizing the move and is requesting comments no later than October 10th. Making the service available to standard mobile phones would provide the most remote parts of the United Kingdom with the access needed to send texts, make phone calls, or even connect to the Internet, functions presently not possible in areas without mobile phone coverage. This is known as direct-to-device. An operation would be permitted after Ofcom has provided a variation to the licenses of mobile network operators. The change would also grant such use to mobile handsets and any other devices that make use of the SIM cards.
The Northern Panhandle Amateur Radio Club, Wheeling, West Virginia, will operate Whiskey 8 Zulu, Quebec for POW and MIA Awareness Special Event Station on September 20th, 2025. Operation will begin at 1300 UTC in the general class portions of the 20 and 40 meter bands. The event honors National POW and MIA Recognition Day, a time to remember prisoners of war and those who are missing in action, as well as their families. In 1979, Congress passed a law authorizing the President to proclaim a National Day of Recognition. President Jimmy Carter designated July 18, 1979, as the first National POW and MIA Recognition Day. In 1986, the event was formally assigned to be observed on the third Friday in September each year. Today, that is the official time to honor the sacrifices made by POWs and MIAs.
The excitement continues to build during these remaining months of planning for the World Radio Sport Team Championship to be held next year in England. Event Chairman Mark M0DXR has announced that members of the wildcard team have been chosen by the organizing committee. The lead position will be held by Diego LW5HR, who showed much promise in the qualifications both as a single operator and as a part of a number of multi-operator teams. His teammate will be Manu LU9ESD. Mark said that given the strong representation of the United States and Europe in the other teams, the makeup of the wildcard team from South American amateurs has satisfied the organizers' goal for the field to achieve international diversity. Wildcard teams are created to recognize candidates with exceptional competitive skills, but who were not chosen during the selection process for the other teams. The preparations and 24-hour contests take place from July 8th to the 13th, showcasing the skills of 50 teams of two-person operators. Like the Olympic Games, it is held every 4 years.
You are listening to North America's premier news and information service for the amateur radio hobbyist. We are This Week in Amateur Radio.
The Young Ladies Radio League has announced 6 scholarship recipients for this year, 2 each for the Ethel Smith K2LMB Memorial Scholarship, the Mary Lou Brown NM7N Memorial Scholarship, and the Martha Wessel K0EPE Memorial Scholarship. Congratulations to Grace Pape, K8LG, and Needy Smith, KN6OJJ, for their selection as recipients of the Ethel Smith Scholarship. Grace is a top contester and youth mentor. She is studying electrical engineering at Cedarville University in Ohio. Needy is a PhD student at the University of Colorado Boulder, where she is studying toward her PhD in aerospace engineering sciences. She is the communications officer for the school's amateur radio club. Madison Kloger, KC1KJT, and Cameron Ellis, WX5CAM, have been chosen for the Martha Wessel Scholarship. Madison is active in public service and emergency communications, and worked recently with the Federal Emergency Management Agency in its Office of Planning and Preparedness. She has a bachelor's degree in emergency management and is pursuing her master's in cybersecurity. Cameron is entering her final year at Texas A&M University, where she is studying meteorology and atmospheric sciences. She became involved in ham radio through the school's Texas Aggie Storm Chasers organization. Rachel Jones, KO4HLC, and Catherine Forson, KT5KMF, are receiving the Mary Lou Brown Scholarship. Rachel, a Ph.D. candidate in aerospace sciences at the University of North Dakota, has been a presenter on radio space science for students and is currently the winter manager of KC4USV at McMurdo Station in Antarctica. Catherine is a senior meteorology student at Texas A&M University and active as an officer in the campus radio club W5AC. She is also a liaison between the club and the Texas Aggie Storm Chasers, where she serves as radio and licensing director. Catherine received the ARRL's Hiram Percy Maxim Award in 2021.
The Federal Communications Commission this week issued a public notice to facilitate the transition of local broadcasters to ATSC 3.0, the next generation television standard designed to enhance viewer experiences with improved picture quality, immersive audio, and interactive features. The Media Bureau's notice outlines regulatory support and clarifies processing practices for ATSC 3.0 license applications, aiming to streamline the shift from the current ATSC 1.0 standard while ensuring minimal disruption to viewers. With this move, the FCC has created a path for local ABC, CBS, Fox, and NBC stations to shut down their current free over-the-air TV signals and switch to the new ATSC 3.0 standard. This will force millions of Americans to buy a new ATSC 3.0 converter to continue receiving television off the air. Although there is no deadline for when this transition must be finished by, local TV stations will be able to request permission to fully shift to ATSC 3.0 if they meet certain requirements. The FCC's announcement focuses on three key areas: clarifying methods for determining eligibility for expedited processing, reaffirming the commitment to process non-expedited applications, and highlighting existing flexibilities in the rules for transitioning stations. These steps are intended to encourage broadcasters to adopt ATSC 3.0, which promises advancements like 4K resolution, mobile viewing capabilities, and enhanced emergency alerts. For expedited processing, the FCC requires transitioning full power and Class A stations to simulcast their primary video programming stream in ATSC 1.0, ensuring that at least 95% of the population within a station's noise-limited service contour retains access to the signal. The Bureau clarified that it will continue to use Longley-Rice terrain analysis to calculate population coverage, a method that accounts for geographical factors to assess signal reach accurately. This approach ensures a precise evaluation of whether an application qualifies for expedited processing, typically completed within 15 business days of public notice. For stations unable to meet the 95% coverage threshold, the FCC reaffirmed its commitment to processing non-expedited applications on a case-by-case basis. These applications are evaluated based on their merits, with the Bureau considering factors that minimize viewer impact. For instance, the FCC may offset predicted population losses if another station within the same network affiliation serves the affected audience. Applicants are encouraged to provide detailed data such as contour overlap maps to demonstrate minimal disruption and public interest benefits. The Bureau also invites broadcasters to consult with its video division staff for guidance on navigating these requirements. The notice also emphasizes existing flexibilities in the rules to support the transition. Notably, ATSC 3.0 stations are only required to simulcast their primary stream in ATSC 1.0, not multicast streams, allowing broadcasters to allocate resources efficiently while adopting the new standard. This flexibility aims to balance innovation with viewer accessibility. The FCC's efforts reflect a commitment to modernizing broadcast television while maintaining service continuity. By providing clear guidelines and encouraging coordination, the agency seeks to accelerate the adoption of ATSC 3.0, ensuring broadcasters and viewers alike can benefit from its advanced capabilities.
AMSAT was well represented at the 2025 HamXposition held in Marlborough, Massachusetts. The event was also the ARRL New England Convention. The booth was appropriately decked out with the AMSAT ambassador flag, as well as other signage from previous events. An aero antenna was displayed on a portable rotation system, plus a 3D printed model of the 3U Golf D satellite with deployable solar panels. An AMSAT CubeSat simulator was operating during the event and sold on Sunday. AMSAT provided a door prize, a copy of the SAT PC32 software that was won by Roger Pushor, NK1L. On Saturday afternoon, Burns Fisher presented AMSAT Golf T software, How Does It Work, during the forum. His talk was about flight software on Golf T, including how multiple processors are coordinated. A second presentation, entitled SDR Transponder Transceiver, was delivered by Ray Brogers, WA1CYB. Ray is a member of the AMSAT engineering team.
Hi, I'm Terry Saunders, N1KIN, and I have a few questions. Do you have a good radio voice? Do you have a quiet recording space, own a professional broadcast microphone and DAW software, and know how to use them? Can you commit to a same-day turnaround when given a script assignment? If you answered yes to all of these questions, and you're willing to volunteer your time to give a little something back to the ham radio hobby, then lend us your voice and join our anchor team for This Week in Amateur Radio. To learn more and see if you have what it takes, contact George Bowen, W2XBS, via email at w2xbs77@gmail.com or look him up on qrz.com.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web podcasts are available.
And finally this week, the chairman of the Federal Communications Commission, Brendan Carr, was on a mission straight to the top of WKRG News 5's 1,865-foot-tall broadcast tower. Carr came to Southern Alabama on a foggy morning to highlight an industry and a career many may not know exists. Only around 200 people climb and maintain these massive broadcast towers nationwide. On this day, Carr made it 201. If we are going to continue to expand connectivity, we need a lot more tower climbers. It's a great job, it's a good paying job, and it's a career, said Carr. After a harness and safety check, he took a 20-minute ride in a lift called a pan and transferred onto the tower where the real work of climbing began. It is always a fun experience to get up in the air and hang with the tower crew, said Carr. Army veteran turned tower technician Hassani Hogan was on Carr's crew Monday. What a guy. It shows his bravery, his abilities, and his commitment to the broadcast industry and our guys that do this. He has done it before and is willing to do it again. After almost an hour and a half, the chairman was back on the ground but still looking up. It was fantastic with Hassani and his crew. They're getting amazing work done. His mission to bring attention to that work was accomplished.
Many of the news and information items heard in this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio have been provided by the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL Audio News Service, and the ARRL Letter, AMSAT, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the Shortwave Listening Post, the Federal Communications Commission, the Radio Society of Great Britain, and Ofcom, the South African Radio League, the International Amateur Radio Union, the Wireless Institute of Australia and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the Amateur Radio Newsline, the Rain Hamcast, Eric Guth, 4Z1UG and QSO Today, QRZ.com, the International Telecommunications Union, the 425DX News, Parks on the Air, and the Soda Reflector, and various news sources on the Internet.
This Week in Amateur Radio is heard all around the world on the amateur bands, and on great repeater systems like the KB3 CNN Gateway FM Association repeater, on 146.730 MHz every Tuesday evening at 7:30 p.m., covering the wide area of western Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia. If your repeater system carries This Week in Amateur Radio, let us know via email, and we will mention your station in an upcoming edition. Send your information to w2xbs77@gmail.com.
With special thanks to all our weekly news sources and to you, our listeners, that wraps up this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. If you'd like to write to us, you can find everything you need, including archive editions of the news service, at our website at twiar.net. And now, for all of us at This Week in Amateur Radio headquarters and our news team around the world, this is Chris Perrine, KB2FAF, wishing you a 73.